Okay, there we go. So essentially, we've got a couple of documents that I've opened up. This is the first one that we refer to, which is the unit spec. And we are looking at discussing today. Okay, there we go. So essentially, we've got. Let me switch this off, which is the broadcast, so it won't do an echo. Sorry about that. So what we are going to look at today would be this particular document in. So this is the unit specification that we normally refer to. And last week we did what is called be able to take effective notes. So it studied about the three different methods of note taking and note making, things like the Cornell method, the mind map method, and we looked at the straight line third method, three methods in particular. And then in today's learning outcome, what we have to look at is focusing on how to draft a piece of research. And then this will be followed by, once you've created a research proposal, then we need to be able to draft a report, which is going to be done, for learning outcome 5. Learning outcome 6 is what we will do tomorrow. So if I just quickly show you and point in that direction in terms of the two, documents that we've got. So this particular learning outcome that we see here, these two, is going to be basically looked at completing, from this particular template that I've got, which is task 3 research proposal. The reason I say task 3 or task 4, and I've named it as task 3, is because when we look at the assignment brief next week for this unit, you're going to see that this is given out in task 3. Learning outcome 4 and 5 are actually covered in task 3. And that's why the labeling of the document has been done as task 3. Now, what we are going to do is, very briefly, I've explained this earlier, is that what you have to do is fill this document up, which is the template. And this template would then allow you essentially to create a proposal or a research project specification. Now, this research project specification is going to be then elaborated into a report which is going to be broken down into 5 broad sections, and that would be covering learning outcome 5. And that would be a mini research report that you are going to be able to compile for evidence when we look at the assignment. Now, for learning outcome 6, just briefly mentioning here, it is not something that we'll discuss today. We have to do a reflection on our academic progress, and this is related to learning outcome 1, except you, Julia, for now. This is related to learning outcome 1. In learning outcome 1, we had to do a review, an audit of our skills, set up some SMART targets, and then create a personal development plan. Now, once you've done the creation of that personal development plan, the learning outcome 6 looks at reflection. That means how much have you been able to complete that plan? What activities were listed out? You've completed, have you managed to complete those activities, then achieve those skills or competencies that you wanted to achieve? And if not, then this reflection plan will allow us to elaborate and then add a few more activities, extend the timeline, and this will be filled up using this particular table or the template which is given in the assignment brief. And this will cover task 6. Assessment criteria 6.1 and 6.2. This is what we are going to discuss tomorrow. Now, if I close that for a minute, because that is not required, and then focus on this particular document that is of interest to us, because this is what we're going to be discussing today with regards to covering learning outcome 4 and 5. Now, if you see the learning outcome 4 talks about be able to means we have to physically do it. We have to do it. It is not theoretical. This would mean that you are going to go about, creating a mini research, doing a mini research, and that is then going to be evidenced as a research report as a part of your evidence in the assignment. So here we are looking at drafting a piece of research. So the drafting of piece of research, first assessment criteria talks about that create a plan on research on a chosen topic in health and social care. So when we look at a chosen topic, we are not going to look at, and this is something which I've mentioned before as a bit of a recommendation. It's not something that you need to mandatory follow, but as a recommendation, what I've said is that at level 3, we do not want to be looking at going into conducting and doing a primary research. That means if you recall the discussion that we had in learning outcome 2 in terms of finding out what are the methods of researching, or carrying out research, they tend to be primary and secondary methods. They tend to be qualitative and quantitative. You look at the research onion, but the basic essence of it is that when we look at collating data, and that data that we collate is normally done through two techniques. One is primary and the other is secondary. In some cases, we also do study about tertiary, but primary and secondary. Primary means you're going to be collecting data first, and that means you'll use questionnaires, surveys, interviews, focus interviews or group interviews to be able to collate the information that is required from the participants directly who are going to be related to the area of your research. And the secondary research tends to be that when you look at collating information from existing sources which have published data on that topic of your research. So there could be information that you could glean from government websites, government reports, other research foundations or organizations which conduct research in health and social care sector. You'd be looking at websites, articles, journals, or peer-reviewed reports, and they will be useful for you because you are going to be extracting data from these reports related to your field or area of research, and then you would write it as evidence or basically paraphrase it and reference it, and then write it as a report that you've carried out research in this area, and this is the areas from which you have gathered, data. Now, at level 3, recommendation has been that you should look at a desk-based or a secondary research so that you do not need to go out and get data from participants, look at the ethical considerations, look at participation, when you ask participants to contribute data to your research or fill up questionnaires or provide personal information, you have to take their consent. And in those cases, when you conduct research in such circumstances, sometimes researchers would need to look at sending out what is called a participant information form, PIF, and a participant consent form, PCF. If you see in health and social care, just try and visualize. We will go into a bit of discussion with the slides as well, but just giving you a bit of a background. If you try and visualize that, how do we carry out these research activities? Now, research activities typically start off by shortlisting and identifying the problem. The problem, when you identify it, you want to then look at a bit of a rationale in terms of why this problem occurs or why this issue occurs. And then you want to investigate and find out the reasons how this problem or issues can be avoided if this is a process that you're going to repeat time and again. Now, that uncovering of rationale in terms of why this problem is occurring and then why these issues are faced again and again are then developed into what are called aims and objectives of your research. So that means you're going to look at developing an objective to say, if, for example, and I'm just giving a literal example, that you look at winters now in countries wherein obviously it snows, you would see that normally diesel cars and petrol cars do not start if the battery is not charged or not fully charged. And in some cases, you have to jump start the car. Now, if you know that this is a problem which is going to time in and occur again, you would normally see people in Nordic countries where you have Norway, Finland, Sweden, or in countries wherein there is extreme temperatures in minus, you would normally see that people carry what is called a jump start kit in their car. So because they know that this is a problem which can occur anytime, even if the battery is fully charged, sometimes the temperatures are that cold, things are frozen, and the cars cannot be started, they would normally carry a jump start kit in their car, because if they need to start the car and if it isn't starting, then they would need to use that kit. Now, because they know that this is a problem which occurs again and again, what they've done is they've looked at a bit of a rationale in terms of why this occurs because of extreme weather conditions, and how is this to be resolved? By buying and keeping a jump start kit in the car, especially when you look at traveling in winters. Similarly, when we look at doing research, what we are looking at doing is we also look at the rationale. We look at a bit of a background that and these two things help us in understanding why the issues are happening or why the problems are happening again. And then they develop into what are called aims and objectives. Now, with the aim of actually ensuring that I do not face this problem again, this is what I'm going to do. These are the steps I'm going to take. And that what decides, your objectives of carrying out the research or the series of activities that you will undertake to uncover the areas which are causing problems. Now, if I relate this to an example of health and social care, you look at the COVID pandemic. And in the COVID pandemic, this is something which mankind has faced for the first time, this pandemic, this virus. And obviously a lot of data had to be collected, researched, and then meaningful findings had to be taken out before they could feed into pharmaceutical companies to be able to produce a vaccine. So what they did was they isolated the genome of the virus. With the isolation of the genome of the virus and the protein which actually mutates to cause this as a condition, and that leads to COVID-19, which is respiratory and breathing related problems, pneumonia in your lungs, water being filled in your lungs, and that is why you need oxygen and oxygenator and things like that in order to recover. And sometimes if this is not detected early, then the patients can slip into a coma and eventually leads to multiple organ failures because you're not feeding, you're not eating. And that is something which was understood initially by the WHO reports when they started to do investigation into the effects of what the virus was causing. And once they understood the effects of these virus, then the objective set was to create a vaccine which will allow the body's internal defense mechanism, the white blood cells, or the defense mechanism to be bolstered. And that is where over a time of 18 months, the vaccine was created, and this vaccine then boosts your body's healthy mechanism to be able to fight with this virus. Now, this has happened as a process of research. It is not something that you can uncover on day one and then you come out with a solution in day 2, and day 3 you start mass vaccination. So what we do in research is to uncover problems. We look at coming out with new diagnoses, new treatments, new medicines, new vaccines, and this allows people to get better and obviously enjoy a healthy and let's say meaningful lifestyle. Now, for the purposes of research at level 3, we've got 2 websites, and I will show you these 2 websites. What you would need to do when we look at desk-based research is essentially go to any of these 2 websites. And when you are on any of these 2 websites, we are going to be looking at downloading a research report or a research which has already been carried out. And that would be in the area of your interest, because the assessment criteria says, create a research plan on a topic in health and social care. So what you need to be able to do is create a plan, means draft a research proposal in the area of your interest in health and social care. So we need to look at some of the topics which are given here on one of the sites, which is the Health Foundation. And the second site that I've looked at is basically the archive for NHS, National Health Service. And this website basically has lots of research reports which have been published by the National Health Service. And we could pick out one particular report which is of the area of interest to me in person, and that would then allow me to go in and basically do the research from that report. Now, how would you go about creating a research proposal? Would be to download a particular report, which I will show you how exactly, and we'll go through the process, because this task talks about be able to. It is not something that I can take you through theoretically. I want to be able to show you practically in terms of how you would go about doing this. And we will do this to understand the learning outcome 4 and 5, and then do this together, and at a later stage, then go about going to the presentation slides to go through and discuss and understand what we have gone through as a process. So first things first, what I want to do is download a particular report. So what I've done is I've gone to the Healthcare Foundation website, and from there I've chosen a topic of my interest, what makes us healthy. Can everybody see the screen? Yeah? Okay, let me just share.
You made the table. Which one?
Let me just share one document so that it's easier. So what I did was, in the process, let me quickly share one thing first, and then I'll go one step after the other. So the first thing is, we've started off from the research proposal, which is this first document. Let me share that. That's the document that we're going to start off. And I've looked at putting 2 links here of 2 websites that you can go to be able to download a research report. These 2 links. One is the Health Foundation, the other is the NHS Research Archive in which we are able to dive in and pick out a research report which has been published already by the National Health Service. So when I click on these two websites open. Now I'll switch you back to the browser to show you these sites. That is how you would go about, essentially, going through these reports. So let me just quickly switch you over. So these are the two websites which have got open, and these two websites essentially, will be utilized for the purposes of downloading a report. So this is the Health Foundation site, follow the links, and the topics of interest you can choose. There is acute care, they are listed chronologically. You can choose any topic which is a topic of your interest, or go to the NHS website where all the research reports are published by topics. Choose one that you feel is relevant to you, is an area of your interest, and download that report. Now, what I've done is I have already gone into one of the topics myself. And then what I've done is I've downloaded a particular report, which is a report of my a topic of my liking. And using that topic of my liking, I have downloaded this particular report, which I'm going to show you next. And what I will then do is, with the help of this report, I'm going to fill up my research proposal template. So let's go into this report. So let me share that report, which I've downloaded from the Health Foundation website. And this is the report that I've downloaded. I have gone through a couple of topics, couple of different types of report. What I don't want to do is pick up a report which is hundreds and hundreds of pages long, which has 5,000 participants' data. And that would mean that I have to read that report first in a lot of detail, and then I have to extract information from that report to fill my research proposal. So I've chosen a report which is a small topic. It's a readable enough report of 33 pages and gives me most of the content that I would need, things like introduction, background into the research, aims and objectives, what and how you would go about conducting literature review, what is the research methodology, how they collate data and present the findings, and then a conclusion towards the end of the report. All these broad 5 chapters are covered, for which I would need to look at getting this information from. So I downloaded this particular report, which is What Makes Us Healthy, an Introduction to Social Determinants of Health. And I looked at this particular topic, in which the report clearly starts off with introduction, talks about the topic in detail, which is health determinants, what makes us healthy. So it helps me build arguments about what is health, why is good health important, why is health influenced by social determinants, things like your age, income, area of your living, your ethnicity, your background. What are the opportunities you get if you're healthy and you're spending, you have access to good healthcare. And then further investigation which has been done, which has been presented as graphs, tables, charts, basically giving me findings of what they've been able to uncover by studying these factors. And lastly, they've drawn conclusions and also recommended further areas of research if somebody is to take this forward. Now, the reason of shortlisting this report is because it will help me, as I mentioned, populate a lot of my details which are required for the purposes of doing my assignment in particular, and also for understanding the learning outcomes 4 and 5. So here is a report, just as an example. It talks about social determinants of health. Social determinants of health tend to be things like your age, your income, your ethnicity, your background, and they are considered that do these factors help in having a healthy lifestyle? And does that make you, if I was living in a, if I was not having access to some of the facilities, then, I could help, I could have poor health because I do not have access to medical facilities. And if I do get ill, then obviously, it's left to my body to be able to recover rather than getting expert help, advice, which is doctors, and then obviously medication, which helps me get better soon and come out of that curve of undergoing that particular illness in a shorter duration of time. And this to a certain extent is possible because if I live in an area or in a country wherein the health systems are developed, if I live in a society, obviously, wherein I'm earning, if healthcare is provided by the government, in some cases it is private healthcare. If I don't have the money, I can't access it. And in those cases, that would be left, down to me and my body to be able to cope and obviously recover. And will that have any effect on my, say, for example, my age in terms of my lifespan, my general circumstances in terms of being healthy? Things like that have been uncovered in this report. So what you have to do is look at a particular topic and then download that report. That's the first thing that you have to do, because all the information that you are going to need is actually going to come from this particular report and the topic of interest that you have chosen to research. So as I've shown you, I've chosen a report which is quite clean, neat. It has lots of usage of pictures. There are lots of arguments which have been built to explain social determinants of health, how education plays a role, housing plays a role. They have been visually discussed: money, resources, our surroundings, what we eat, how we work, where we work, how do we commute, and all these factors contribute to us having a healthy lifestyle. Now, this is a good example of report because this allows me to get pretty much everything from here without having to depend on downloading other documents or other types of reports to cover this particular topic. So this is the first step that you will do, is to visit these sites and then choose a topic of your interest and then download a meaningful report which will have everything in it in order for us to cover and get information into the research proposal. Now, how would I go about doing it? Let me minimize all the other documents, and I'm going to only show you two and show you how this is to be done. So if I now share my screen with just the two documents. So here is what I've got the report on the right-hand side, as you can see. And on the left-hand side, I've got my research proposal template. So the first thing that I'm going to do is delete all this in the template that you've got on Moodle, and I will make it blank. Okay, so I'll leave the ethical considerations, but I'll pretty much leave the template and make it blank. I'll write my name here. Once I've written the name, I would look at the overarching topic of research. So the overarching topic of research is what makes us healthy, an introduction to social determinants of health. That is the topic of our research. Now, you would be needing to do a bit of formatting so that obviously, data that you put in is, presentable in the template. This becomes my research topic: what makes us healthy, an introduction to social determinants of health. Now, what is your role within the organization and how are you linked to this proposed topic of research? So here you're going to say, as a student researcher, I have chosen the topic of what makes us healthy, and this is going to be the area of research that I wish to undertake for the completion of my unit assignment. This is more or less going to be the wordings that you will put pretty much as standard, and it explains, who are you, why are you looking at this report, and why are you looking at primarily, referencing this report in this proposal. Now, state the aims and objectives of research. So aims and objectives are going to come from when I go into the depth of the report, and here the aims will come from why focus on social determinants of health. So here what you have to do is read the report and then read some paragraphs of it, and then look at what are the meaningful reasons why the research is being carried out to study social determinants of health. Why is income level, where you live, how you learn, how you earn, how do you commute to your place of work important in determining the health of an individual. So you would need to read this, and what I will do is basically summarize some aims and objectives. So let's look at the aims and objective. This guide refers to the factors in daily life of people in the UK and create health support and well-being, blah, blah, blah. And then what I will do is look at why good health. So here is where I'm going to look at getting some of my objectives. So the aim of the report is to understand social determinants of health. So this is going to be the aim of the report. So how do the social determinants of health, so basically, if I rephrase this and turn this into an aim for the report, and that will be done by rephrasing it. So the objective of the study is, do social determinants play a role in the individual's health and lifestyle? Because what we are going to do is we are going to study the reasons behind why social factors are important for an individual to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And here we are going to also list down a few objectives. So the objectives are going to come from why is good health important? As you can see, some questions which have been raised in the report. So these are the two objectives. Why is good health important? And the moral case which has been formed here in terms of why good health is important and why the National Health Service in the UK provides these free of cost to the members of public or people who are British citizens, is that in 1942, Sir William Beveridge actually published a report and made a recommendation that health and social care services in the UK should be provided free of cost to British citizens. And he made a case that led to the creation of the National Health Service in 1951. Now, because we are doing a research at level 3, I would not recommend putting more than 2 objectives for your research report. Even if the report that you've downloaded has more than objectives, I would certainly say that you don't need to choose more than 2 objectives. The second objective would be what influences health and what influences health. This could be the second one, and the third one is what can bring about change in the health and social care setup or system. So I would put some of the aims and objectives from the report, but generally I would restrict them to 1 or 2. Now, what is the purpose of the report will actually come from either the background or the introduction which is given in the report. Background, in some cases, it's going to be abstract or the introduction, of the report, because that is where it will tell you why the researcher is actually looking at doing or carrying out this research. So when I look at the introduction here, it talks about what causes health disease. It talks about a couple of circumstances, and then it says the Healthcare Foundation has written a guide to a brief introduction to the social determinants of health. So this gives you a particular idea that why this research report is being looked at. So if I know from my general knowledge that type 2 diabetes and heart disease are the biggest 2 killers, even greater than cancer currently for humanity, this is one of the reasons why this report was, the investigation was done, is that does having, poor background or poor living conditions, or I would say no education or little education, have an effect on how you grow up to be a healthy individual? And does it have any effect on the health of an individual if these conditions are not, adequate when you're growing up in your early years? So this particular background is basically the background that I would need to summarize in my own words. And obviously here, the purpose of research report You have to write in about 30 to 50 words. So what I would do is, I'm not going to copy this as it is, but what I'm going to do is read this and then write it in my own words to say what is the reason of the research. Now, once I've done that, I want to also look at what is the specific focus of research. The specific focus of research is social determinants of health and their effect on the health of an individual. This is the specific focus of this research, because when we read the report, one of the things which is going to come again and again and again is going to be talking about, basically discussing what is social determinants and what role do they play in helping the individual have a healthy lifestyle. Now, there are some key points and key issues or in areas of interest. In some reports, this will be there. In some reports, this will not be there. So this can be left blank. What is the broader significance or issue of interest in this case? Towards the end, you would see there is a conclusion which is being drawn on the report, and that conclusion will provide you the broader significance of this research report. Why is it that this research was carried out? And does the report actually come out with meaningful conclusions? This is something that is going to come from either the recommendations which are given or the conclusion which has been drawn towards the end of the report. Now, some part of the questions you might not need to answer, because what we are looking at here is drawing up a research proposal. And the research proposal typically tends to have, 5 broad headings. So aims of introduction, aims and objectives. It'll talk about where will you go about collecting your data from. What is the literature that you're going to, when I say literature, that means published reports or, government reports or any such previous research which has been carried out in this field is available for you to look into and understand what were the findings of this research report, or what were the findings of this particular project, or what was the activities, what activities were undertaken and what kind of results with these activities actually predicted. And that will come from the review of the existing literature. So here, when you look at review of the existing literature, it is going to come from sources which are going to be looked at for collating data for the purposes of conducting that research. So what you're going to do is write about, I would say, 30 to 50 words, and basically in 30 to 50 words, put down the key areas that you're going to have from which you're going to get the data. So in this report, as you can see, I've got certain areas like the national government report. There are certain reports from the local government, the voluntary sector, communities, funders, business and employers. And this has allowed me to look at existing pieces of research which has been published, which are more or less directly related to the topic that I'm researching and the aims and objectives that I'm researching. So you would need to look at reading this in the report and then putting it down, in your own words, summarizing it. We don't want to copy it. We want to look at summarizing it. And literature review tends to be, picking up specific arguments from already published pieces of work on the specific topic that you are actually looking at researching and investigating. Now, research methodology is the way in which you are going to go about carrying this research. So as I've recommended, it tends to be 2 types, primary or secondary, but my recommendation would be to consider conducting the research via secondary methods. That means you are going to be looking at existing reports, data which is published, and from there extract meaningful data which is directly related to your aims and objectives and the topic of your research, and write that in for the purposes of your research methodology. So research methodology is something that you're going to write in about 30 to 50 words. So is it going to be qualitative research, quantitative research? And then what is the research strategy that you're going to use to be able to conduct this study? And that is what is going to come here. Now, sources of information is going to come from where can I find information that I need for my topic. and they are going to come from either the bibliography which is listed, or in some reports it is going to be quite clearly listed out as what are the key places, organizations from which, or websites from which I'll be able to find data that I need for my research. So in this case, these are the sites that we need to look at. And that is what I would be looking at for the purposes of, conducting, I would say, my research. So these would be useful because this is something that you need to write in terms of where are you going to get these sources or information about, these sources, and that is what is required to be, mentioned here. So if I just do away with the formatting, and this is what I would put here, and they would be telling me that this is the place where the students have gone in to collect information on this particular area of their topic and their research. Last but not the least, you're looking at drawing conclusions. What is the expected result from the report? What is it that you are going to uncover when you carry out this particular research? So towards the end of your research report, there is going to be something in terms of a chapter which will say, or a heading which will say conclusions of the report. And conclusions of the report are what you need to look at reading and then basically summarizing here, and they will become a part and parcel of your research proposal. The ethical considerations you could read, they are standard considerations which normally all researchers have to consider. And here is where you can delete some which you feel are not meeting the criteria or not directly related to the study that you are undertaking, and you can delete some of them, and in some cases they can be left as it is if you do feel that they are directly related to your aims and objectives and how you go about carrying the study. Now, this bit that you complete is going to help you complete part one of your task, and that is what we are discussing today, which is be able to plan and draft a piece of research. So what we are looking at doing with this is basically looking at creating what is called a research project proposal or a specification, and that is what is required to be studied in what is called the learning outcome 4. So we need to be able to plan and draft a piece of research. This can be done by identifying topic which is of interest. And some of these topics that I've listed here are from the two websites which have been given, the Health Foundation and the NHS website. What you need to then do is by downloading that report, first part you have to do is download that report and keep that report safe, because that is what you will need to submit along with the assignment, because it will form a part of reference for the lecture, for me in this case, to look at that this was the report and this is what you produced as an evidence by gleaning into it, by reading into it, and then writing it in your own words to produce your mini research project for the assignment. And then what you do is, as I've gone ahead and done, identify the aims and objectives, look at the literature review, what is the research methodology in terms of how the sampling has been done, what data has been collected, how many participants, because sometimes when you download these reports, they would have been written and, concluding by conducting primary research. But because you're reading that report and actually summarizing it in your own words for the purposes of your own, say, submission of assignment, you are doing it as a second person. And that is why it is secondary research for you. But in the first instance, if you had gone out to the field, used questionnaires, surveys, spoken to the people directly to collect that data, then in that case, the research methodology would have been primary. But whatever is the research methodology mentioned in the report is what you would need to get, what you would need to get into this report. And then essentially you are looking at, if in certain reports, which I'm also going to try and show you, generally what you see is that because these reports are done through the purpose of carrying out primary research, you would generally see that some of them also have what is called a questionnaire given towards the end, which is used to collate information and collect data. And this generally is done because the initial report, when it was carried out, or research when it was carried out, is primarily done through the primary technique or primary methods. And that primary method tend to be by going in and collecting data firsthand from participants. Now, once you have done this basic part, at some stage, you're going to then draft it into this proposal template, which I've given. You can also do it in a normal Word document, but the proposal template, proposed template that I've provided is going to be slightly more useful because it will help you focus and put all the data which is required primarily in various headings as per the requirement of the assignment brief and the assessment criteria is given in this learning outcome. So we're going to be then looking at populating this research proposal, which includes things like introduction, aims and objectives, rationale of the report, significance of the report. And then you get into literature review. And then after literature review, you're talking about research methodology, whether the research was carried out using primary methods, secondary methods, whether it's a qualitative report, that means you are focused on coming out and studying the underlying themes, or in some cases, you are going about collecting data, which is going to be quantitative, numeric. And basically, that would mean that you are looking at, say, for example, collecting information from a lot of participants and then summarizing the data, numerical data, using that into meaningful, reports or, charts and graphs and, things like tables that you will use it to present the information uncovered, and that will come into your data collection and findings. And towards the end, you're looking at putting, some words in for, what could be the proposed conclusion that you're expecting to draw from undertaking this study, what could be the findings that you uncover, and then towards the end, you put references and obviously things like a questionnaire that you would have used or the report would have used to collate that. And that is something which is put together in the research project specification for this particular learning outcome 4. Now, in the appendix, towards the end of your research proposal, we cover things like ethical considerations, limitations to research, any constraints that you would have, sometimes resources, people, can become constraints for you to carry out research. When data is collected, questionnaires are not filled properly, you have to discard them. The results sometimes for discarded questionnaires, tend to skew the results in one particular direction. That means because a lot of participants did not understand the question, they did not fill the results or, questions, the questionnaires properly, which means you had to discard a lot of them. And that has not allowed you to come to the actual results or expected results that you were looking at, achieving. And in those cases, they are also mentioned towards the end and in the appendix, and they could be labeled or headlined as constraints to the research, limitations to the research, future areas of research, and ethical considerations which were taken into account to carry out this study. Now, this part that you complete is something which is going to be a document which will be a research proposal. And this particular document generally tends to be 200 to 250 words, 250 to 300 words essentially, and that would help complete and achieve the learning outcome 4. Now, I want to show you one other report which I have downloaded, and this report is quite a detailed report which I've downloaded from the National Health Service website. Now, this research was looking into what is called the impact of disability on the lives of young children. So people who have disabilities or have some sort of physical disabilities, and if they are not provided proper, let's say, facilities and equipment and let's say support in the early years of their development, then in those cases, this report looks at analyzing, does that impact how the individual grows up, how that child grows up to be an individual, and does that child face a life of constraints? That means, does it impose limitations on people who have disabilities? And that means that they have narrow opportunities available or limited opportunities available as they grow up to be an individual. Now, this report is a 95-page report, but it's a good report in the sense that, again, when I look at populating my research proposal, so if I show you the full screen again for a minute. So if I have to populate my research proposal, which is this, using this report, as you would see, I would be pretty much able to get everything off the report straight away. I don't even need to, sometimes I will put it this way, I don't need to even look at, cross-checking it, because everything has been organized in a very good format for me to be able to, look at this report to populate my research proposal. And later on in Learning Outcome 5, when we discuss, how to elaborate the research proposal into a written report, this report would be very, very useful. So if I go into Learning Outcome 5, which basically says produce an academic piece of work, and here is where we need to now, from the research proposal, which is here, detail some of these things that we have uncovered from the report, and then write it into a mini research report of about, say, 2,000 words. We would be able to do it very, very in a very good detail and very, very easily if I have something like this, because it talks about the background of research, objectives and scope of research, what is the data collection methods and techniques, research methodology, and then what are the findings. Now, because this is a very detailed report, and if you read through it, which I've done, it has gone and collected data from 5,000 participants. Now, we don't need to go into all the findings, and we don't need to look at the whole report. And again, that is where I would suggest that we look at shortlisting 1 or 2 objectives that we are going to study, and then look at compiling our assignment report to hit the criteria for Learning Outcome 4 and 5. So here, they've gone about, giving us a bit of a background and an introduction into what the report is, the overall finding. As you can see, if I wanted to look at, what are going to be the overall findings of the research, it's very clearly given. Purpose of research, is very clearly given here in the executive summary. Then when I go into things like specific area of focus of research, it is about disability. And again, I can straight away copy some of the bits or rewrite some of the bits in my own words to cover the specific area. What is the overall broader significance of the research and what it expects to uncover is given in the overall findings. Now, outline what points in your project you will establish and briefly explain those points. So here they've considered points like demographics, in particular pregnancy and birth, and parenting techniques, which are going to be outlined in this case, to cover these 2 parts of the research proposal. And then when I go in, there are obviously a lot of other points, child development, family structure. But again, going back to highlighting that because we are doing it at level 3, we don't want to do an extensive research, so limit it to the objectives that you want to study. And that is what we are going to be, getting a few of them from here to populate these, columns on the rows on the, or the questions on the research proposal. Then what is the conclusion that you expect to draw is actually given here, as you can see very clearly. You have to read this and write it in about 30 to 50 words in terms of what could be the, conclusion that you would draw out in the research. And then sources of information and methodology is also very clearly highlighted. Sources of information is given towards the end. When I look at, say, if I scroll down to the end of the report, there is an annexure, there is an appendix, as you can see, and the sources of information are very clearly highlighted in terms of where they are going to get this from. And then you can see conclusions have also been drawn. So obviously, I don't want to look at all the parameters that they've considered. I might choose 1 or 2, and that is what I will look at, only summarizing in my report, which is the result and conclusion here. And at a later stage, where I have to cover Learning Outcome 5, as you can see here, which talks about producing my own report, I can use this report very clearly to be able to present my report in about 1,000 to 1,500 words, because everything has been very clearly detailed out in terms of aims and objective, rationales of research, literature review, research methodology. So if I just briefly show you now some of the headings for Learning Outcome 5, So if I go into the aims and objectives and background of research, that's the background, as you can see. The aims and objectives, as you can see, there are lots of bullet points. There are maybe in excess of 4, 5, about 9 objectives. So when I look at doing my report from this, I would not look at taking more than 2 objectives, because we are not looking at an extensive research report. We are looking at understanding how a research proposal is drawn and how a research study is undertaken. So I would say, concentrate on taking 1 or 2 objectives and then follow through on those objectives in terms of going into the report and writing the report. Now, data methods and methodology is basically looking at, your research methodology, which has been given. And if I go back on the top, in terms of analysis, data analysis and finding, they are very clearly given here. So let me just go back. So data methods, and then if you see, this is your research methodology, which is it's talking about. Analysis and presentation of results is also summarized nicely in a couple of points, and then findings have been presented. So when you go about presenting your findings, conclusions for the mini research, you're going to be able to take screenshots from here of certain charts, bar graphs, and certain points of inferences which have been drawn up, and they would be useful for you to write in your report as data collections, analysis, and findings. So lots of information, as you can see, has been given in this report. But again, going back to the point that we are looking at considering 1 or 2 objectives. So look at only presenting the data for those objectives which are related and you mention in your report. Although, as you can see, there are lots of findings because they have 9 objectives. You are looking at only covering maybe 2, and that would be good enough. And then towards the end, what I would suggest is you draw and look at what is called the ethical considerations. And in the appendix, you are basically summarizing some of the points which are related to the questionnaire which was served to be able to collect this data and the sources of information. Excuse me, source of information, which is references that you need to look at compiling for the purposes of finalizing your report. If I minimize this slightly, make it small, and just and I've just look at showing you the report. As you would see in the report towards the end, they've drawn up what is called conclusions, and these conclusions obviously again relate to only the topics that you're selecting. And towards the appendix, they mentioned things like how the data analysis has been done. So in this case, the researcher has considered what is called advanced statistical techniques like regression analysis, use of a software called SPSS to collate the data, because they've collected data from 5,000 participants and it is not physically or manually possible to collate that data. So that data has been fed into a software, and the software has then churned out meaningful information which has been used to derive charts, graphs, tables to present the findings of that report. And this is how I would suggest you would go about finally presenting your report or writing your academic piece of research in Learning Outcome 5. So it is important for you to understand the importance of this research proposal, which is going to be helping you to understand the broader topics or headings under which you're going to undertake this study. Downloading the report, because we are looking at doing a secondary research or a desk-based research. Downloading a quality report is going to be important, so that you have to not then fish for information or find or search information. You will be able to get everything from that one report that you have downloaded, which is the topic of your interest, and then populate the research proposal, and then later stage go about writing the report altogether into an academic piece of work to complete your Learning Outcome 5. Now, at this stage, any questions, anybody? Any questions at your end?
Not for the moment.
Right. Okay. Anybody else? So have you understood in terms of what is to be done? Because this is a bit of a practical unit, and where we have to do is we have to go about actually doing it rather than studying it theoretically.
Mr. Singh, so it means for lesson 4 and 5, we need to present 2 of those templates while filling it out, right? Or it was just
Correct, yes, that is correct. So for learning outcome 4, you will be filling up this research proposal template. And for learning outcome 5, we are going to be looking at producing and elaborating the research proposal into 5 broad chapters. And that would be looking at writing a research report.
Okay, so we can use the same template, right? Like the way you showed us. Okay,
absolutely, yes. So I will go and quickly check with some of the others on the session just to check if we have any
Excuse
questions.
me?
Yes,
Can
go
I
ahead.
have something? So you mean I could just choose any topic of our own? Yeah.
So come again, sorry, Bushra, you have chosen a topic?
Yeah, you mean I should just choose, like to go on the website to choose the topic we're going to go research on it. That's what I'm trying to ask. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
you're going to go to these 2 websites, which are
Yes.
given on the research proposal template as well, and also on Moodle. So if I briefly show this to you, on Moodle, they are also given as 2 links to these websites that you can go on to, and they would then allow you to search the topics of the website, and then depending on what you like, you can actually go about then shortlisting that topic and then download a particular report.
Okay.
So if I go into the course and I go into the academic and research skills, as you can see, these are the 2 sites which I've listed here as links, which you can actually go in and use to read the reports first or read the topics, and then look at a shortlisting, shortlisting a report that is of interest, download it, and then use this research proposal template, which is given here as a Word document, to populate it to complete learning outcome 3. Okay, good stuff. Any other questions, anybody? So this is going to mean that you may go through the websites, shortlist and download a report which is of interest, a topic of your interest, choose a topic which is a small topic, not a very big or a broad topic. Otherwise, the report is going to be multiple pages long. There are some reports on these sites which are 200, 300 pages long as well. We don't want to be looking at falling into that trap of choosing something which is going to be too much. Try and shortlist an area which is, or a report which is of 20 to 30 pages. In some cases, most of these reports are between 80 to 100 pages or 80 to 120 pages. So you'll have to look at downloading something which allows you to extract information from these reports in a very meaningful manner without we having to fish about for information. So if the aims, objective, rationale, background, research methodology, data collection and findings, a questionnaire, conclusions, recommendations are clearly written in the table of contents of that report, that would be a better approach to shortlist that particular report and topic and download it and read it. Because when you write the project, when you write a report for your project, it is going to be easy because you're going to paraphrase some part of it and write it in your own words. In some places, you're going to take screenshots of the data presentation of graphs and charts rather than redrawing them. And that would help you go through this process of presenting a research topic, which is a research proposal, and then writing a detailed academic report to present that topic in a much more easier way than having to go about doing it from scratch. So anybody, any other questions at this stage? Okay, that's great.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, so if you have no questions, that's great, no problem. Go through this particular discussion that we've had today. The video should be on YouTube instantly. The data can be accessed for the research proposal and the template in the 2 sites which I mentioned on Moodle. And I will catch up with you tomorrow, to discuss the last outcome, which is learning outcome 6. And that will cover, what is called the reflection of our PDP, and will relate to learning outcome 1 that we have done in the start of this unit. So thanks very much for joining, and I will see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.